Welcome to this explainer. Let's just dive right in, shall we? Today we're exploring the science of how risky play shapes healthy childhood development. And to make this a bit more fun to visualize, we're going to follow a story told in this soft paper-cut style. Think of a little paper-cut kitten exploring the world alongside its animal friends. We'll watch how our feline protagonist navigates uncertainty and, well, what that actually teaches us about human kids.
Right off the bat, we've got to ask a pretty urgent question. Why are modern children more anxious than ever before? It's kind of like, imagine an overprotected indoor kitten, right? Kept in this perfectly sterile, completely padded greenhouse. Today's kids are dealing with unprecedented levels of worry and stress. We do literally everything to keep them safe, but by removing all those little bumps and scrapes, are we accidentally causing a totally different kind of harm?
And the stakes here are incredibly high. Researcher Helen Dodd found something staggering. 50% of all anxiety disorders begin before the age of 11. 50%. That is a massive number, and it really sets the stage for why our paper-cut kitten's journey into the wild is so absolutely crucial. Early childhood is exactly when we need to be laying down the tracks for emotional resilience.
So what's actually driving all this anxiety? Well, researchers call it the cotton wool culture. It's basically the result of helicopter parenting, creating these highly restricted environments that totally deprive kids of uncertainty. When our metaphorical indoor kitten is never allowed to face a real challenge or even a slightly scary situation, it becomes overly cautious. It gets terrified of new experiences and just doesn't know how to handle a full spectrum of emotions.
To really get this, we should look at the work of Dr. Peter Gray. He frames risk as a biological necessity. Seriously, all young mammals, from our little paper-cut kittens and puppies to actual human children, instinctively engage in risky play. They literally put themselves in vulnerable positions on purpose just to practice feeling afraid. By doing this while playing, they learn how to not overreact when real, actual stress hits. It's quite literally practice for survival.
Section 1. What is an adventure playground? Let's get into it. Let's look at a physical escape from this cotton wool culture, the junk playground. This concept actually started back in post-war Denmark. A guy named John Bertelsen noticed something really profound in his Emdrup diary. He saw that urban environments had completely robbed kids of the space they needed to fight imaginary battles or climb trees, spaces where they could, satisfy that deep urge to just be a caveman. Kids desperately need spaces to unleash those wild imaginative instincts, and modern cities just don't offer that.
So look at the difference here between traditional playgrounds and adventure playgrounds. Traditional ones are fixed, they're modular, and honestly, they're kind of dull once a kid masters them. Plus, they can actually be hazardous because bored kids end up using the equipment the wrong way. But adventure playgrounds, like the famous Playground NYC, are incredibly dynamic. They use scrap materials, real tools. Sure, they look like absolute chaos, but they foster massive cognitive, physical, and social growth.
In an adventure space, play follows what's called a play cycle. It's messy, it's unstructured, and it's 100% directed by the kids. Imagine our paper-cut kittens freely giving and responding to play cues, like a quick look, a gesture, or handing over a tool to a puppy friend with absolutely zero adult interference. They determine exactly what they're playing and why, totally on their own terms.
Moving on to Section 2, the 6 elements of embracing risk.
So what does this actually look like in the real world? Well, pioneer landscape architect Marjorie Allen brought this junk playground idea to Britain, and she championed 6 interconnecting risks. We're talking height, speed, tools, dangerous elements like fire or water, rough and tumble play, and finally, the ability to disappear or get lost. Picture our paper-cut kitten playfully scaling a massive tree, zipping down a hill, or hiding deep in the tall grass. They're testing their physical limits, and every single one of these elements builds some serious, deep-seated confidence. Through navigating these risks, kids dive into what experts call mastery play and locomotor play. Basically, this means toddlers and young animals are learning to build dens, swing from ropes, and really manipulate their physical space. They aren't just passively sliding down a plastic tube, they're actively shaping the world around them.
Now you might be wondering, who on earth is watching them do all this? Enter the play worker. Unlike a hovering helicopter parent, a play worker is a totally passive guardian. They're constantly doing these dynamic risk-benefit assessments in their heads, but they never ever dictate the play. It's kind of like the strict no parents allowed rule at Playground NYC. The play worker just sits back, observes, and only steps in to prevent actual serious harm. This gives our little kitten absolute control over the adventure.
Which brings us to Section 3, overcoming fear and saying goodbye to anxiety.
So how does messing around with real hammers or climbing high directly fight childhood anxiety? It comes down to this incredible biological process called fear extinction. When a little kitten climbs a tree that feels just a bit too high, its heart races, right? It gets the jitters. But by surviving and conquering that climb, it inoculates itself against future panic. It literally gets used to the bodily sensations of fear. The scary thing just loses its power. This is exactly how normal, healthy jitters are stopped from hardening into clinical anxiety.
Now contrast that fear extinction with something called the avoidance high. If you always let a kid run away from a harmless shadow or a mild social fear, they get this addictive rush of relief. But here's the catch. That relief actually breeds more anxiety because it teaches the brain that running away is the only way to feel safe. Confronting the fear directly, like they do in risky play, is the healthy alternative that completely strips that fear of its power.
I know what you're probably thinking right now. Isn't this super dangerous? Well, actually, the research shows there are only 0.15 medically treated injuries per 1,000 hours of kid-led risky play. To put that into perspective for you, adventure playgrounds are statistically safer than organized sports like soccer or baseball. The real danger here is a no-risk childhood.
And you know, one of the most misunderstood risks is rough and tumble play. Imagine our paper-cut puppies and kittens rolling around, tackling each other. They aren't actually fighting, they're safely figuring out their own strength, testing their flexibility, and learning social protocols. It teaches them vital boundaries and how to read the physical and emotional cues of others. It's so important.
Finally, Section 4, Thriving in Risk. Let's look at the big picture.
We've seen how our kitten faces its fears, but what are the long-term benefits of letting kids navigate a wild, risky world? The data is actually crystal clear. A major University of Exeter study led by Dr. Helen Dodd found that kids who engage in high-adventure, thrilling play show significantly lower symptoms of anxiety and depression. And even more amazing, during highly stressful global events like the recent pandemic lockdowns, these adventurous kids showed way higher happiness and far greater resilience. Risky play literally acts as an emotional buffer. But beyond just individual resilience, these adventure playgrounds act like a miniature democratic society. Because adults aren't swooping in to solve every little argument, our animal friends are forced to cooperate. They have to negotiate who gets the hammer, they have to share materials, and they resolve conflicts totally on their own. It's basically the ultimate training ground for becoming a functional, independent adult.
So, the main takeaway from this whole explainer really mirrors the journey of our paper-cut kitten. It started out sheltered, maybe a little anxious, but through the dirt, the minor scrapes, handling tools, and managing risks in the junk playground, it has grown so much. It hasn't just survived, it's transformed. Now it's a highly capable, self-regulated, and quietly confident feline, totally ready to take on the real world.
And that leaves us with a final thought to ponder today. Knowing that the cotton wool culture breeds anxiety, and that facing mild dangers actually builds resilience, I have to ask you, how can you step back and introduce just a little more wildness and managed risk into the lives of the children around you? Because honestly, sometimes the absolute most loving thing we can do as adults is to simply get out of the way and let them play.
Knowledge grows through sharing. What are your thoughts on today's topic? Let me know in the comments below. Don't forget to subscribe as we continue to grow together.